This is the screenshot of the main menu for How-To software. For 20 years I've been writing programs for the Windows platform to help students learn high school mathematics skills. I've just recently made an app for the Kindle that addresses the most foundational skill that's needed for high school math. Everything else builds on it. All of the calculus and algebra are not easy for students unless they have a good grasp of signed numbers. This is what the signed number app looks like. It's quite straightforward. First thing the student has to do is choose whether he wants to practice adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing, or a mixed combination. And then once he chooses that, then he gets the one he's chosen is brought forward, and then he can decide to practice continually. If he's waiting for somebody to come, he doesn't have to do a certain number, or he can do 20 problems. I suggest that he do 20 problems at a time, and this is what happens. A problem is presented, and you use those little buttons there to enter the answer and press check, then new problem, and just go from there. When 20 problems are completed, it will say how many seconds it took to do each problem. This way a student can compete with himself and see if he's improving and how quick he is able to respond to signed numbers. I have taught for 30 years, and I have known over the years many students who have gotten perfect ACT scores and several who have gotten perfect SAT scores, and not one of them was not proficient with signed numbers. Any math class is facilitated by a good grasp of signed numbers. And it's impossible for a student to get a perfect score if they're slowed down by calculator use. It's been easy for students the last 10 years to get lazy and depend on the calculator. And most adults have witnessed this when a student can't add 3 plus 2. But it would really help a lot if the numbers from 1 through 12 were learned by rote. As unpopular as that statement is, it facilitates everything and makes the student much more efficient. And that's why I wrote the app. It took me longer than the student will have to use it to write the app. I find that if a student commits to working at this for like 3 weeks, he can clear up the problems of years of not knowing signed numbers. And I encourage parents to encourage their students to master signed numbers. I'm going to use some of my Windows programs to explain the rules for assigned numbers. Let's look at one of my foundational topic, Windows, and here's Model Math. I wanted to show students what adding really was, so I have this little modeling program here. When we add, we are just doing repetitive counting. For instance, if we had 6 and then we decided to add to it 3, we're really taking 6 and counting 3 more units onto it. So once people decided the sequence for counting, the answers to addition problems were set, especially once we chose to work in base 10, I guess because we have 10 fingers. So it doesn't have, we don't have a choice about what the answers to these problems are. If you say, I want to add 2 and 3, the answer is going to be 5. Now, to model subtraction, it's just the reverse of that. You have a certain number, like 8, and then if you decide to subtract, you're counting backwards, so to speak. And if you count backwards 3, you get to the 5. So adding and subtracting, like many people learned in first grade, is just accumulating things for adding and taking away. And when we're young, we don't usually deal with positives and negatives. But as we mature mathematically, we see that sometimes we want positive numbers to represent an asset, and a negative number maybe a debt, or maybe a positive is a temperature gradient and a negative means something else. We have, with the invention of negative numbers, we have new rules that we have to get. I'm going to push end on this and open up another program that I have, which is sign numbers. This is a quiz that I made for students to take in class, and it requires me to put in the student name. But I'm just using this to create some problems. When we add sign numbers, this randomly generates some sign number problems. We have positives and negatives, and we have to combine them. Now, I tell students who have trouble with this just to think of the positives as money you have and the negatives as money you owe. So, for instance, here we have $10, and you found out that you owed your mother $7. Then how rich would you be? Well, you would actually, since they are at war with each other, so to speak, the positives and the negatives are in different directions. The positives are trying to make you richer, and the negatives are trying to make you poorer. The question is, which one is going to win? Since the absolute value of 10 is greater than the absolute value of negative 7, it's going to win by 3 on the positive side. Now, here in the second problem, this is a bad day. You owed $7 to your mom from yesterday and $12 for today. You're really in the hole. You owe her both of these amounts. They're both pulling you in the same direction. So you would use first grade arithmetic and count up, remembering that they're both negative, but you would say, if I owed you 7 and I owed you 12, then I would be 19, but it would be at all debts, so it would be negative 19. Same here with problem number 3. It's going to be another negative 19 because they're both going in the same direction. Number 4, we have another war. We have a debt of 4, but yet we have a 9. If you said, I've got $9, but I have to pay him back 4, then how much would you have? At least you would have something. You wouldn't be just working for nothing. You'd have 5 more than you lost. So the answer to that problem would be 5. Now let's skip down here to problem number 8, where we have negative 8 and 5. If you owed your mother $8 and you looked in your wallet and you had 5, and you tried to pay things off, you would still be owing. So it's the answer is going to be negative, and it's going to be negative. How much? It's going to be the difference in the absolute value between 8 and 5. So you're going to owe 3. This is the way adding sign numbers, see, we're adding various sign numbers, works. If I'm going to push end on this and pull this up again, if we start talking about subtracting sign numbers, what we have is a subtraction symbol between these different sign numbers. Now this changes things a little bit. I like to explain this. What happens when you subtract a negative? Well, I try to explain this to students. Sometimes I say, what if you went to the store and you bought something, your mother didn't really want to buy it for you, but you said, I'll pay you back. And she said, okay, let's write an IOU. So this would be like an IOU, $11. And when you get home, your mother says, oh, forget the IOU, just tear it up. Well, if you take away the debt, that at that point your mother gave you that thing that was worth $11. So subtracting a negative is the same as a positive. And I usually just tell students to say negative makes a positive, so this would be like 5 plus, this is the equivalent to 5 plus 11, and the answer would be 16. Here you're subtracting a positive, so a negative, a positive, subtracting a positive is going to be the same as adding a negative, so this would be negative 14. Here you have a positive, and this is the same as subtracting 2 when you have subtract a positive. Here you have 2 negatives, minus a negative 9. That's the same combination that would happen if you added the 2. So this one would be 18. I hope that these few examples will help you understand how to subtract sign numbers. Now, if we go to multiplying, the rules are quite different. When you multiply two positives, the answer is always positive. When you multiply a positive times a negative, it doesn't matter which one's bigger, which one's smaller, or anything like that. If you multiply a positive times a negative, the answer is negative. If you multiply a negative times a negative, that's like taking away a negative again. A negative times a negative is always a positive. Students often get these rules mixed up with the rules for addition and subtraction. You have to get two categories in your brain. Two negatives make a positive, not in addition, but in multiplication. So I hope that will help you when you go to practice on your Kindle app.